जय गोपीजनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन यमुना तीरावनचारी यमुना तीरावनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद इस डिवाइन ग्रेस ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 10, Text 21. Drishtashram karmata atmano vai bhartur gantur bhavataschanumanye यथा सतोदानयनादि आभवात् समूल इष्टो व्यवहार मार्गः दृष्टश्रमकर्मत आत्मनो वै भर्तुर्गन्तुर्भवतश्चानुमन्ये यथा सतोदानयनादि आभवात् समूल इष्टो व्यवहार मार्गः। Ladies, please. Drashta, it is experienced by everyone. Shramaha, fatigue. Karmataha, from acting in some way. Atmanaha, of the soul. Why, indeed. Bhartuhu, of one who is carrying the palanquin. Gantuhu, of one who is moving. Bhavataha, of yourself. Cha, and. Anumanye, I guess like that. Yatha, as much as. Asata, with something that is not an actual fact. Uda, of water. Anayana adi, of the bringing and other such tasks. Abhavat, from the absence. Samulaha, based on evidence. Ishtaha, respected. Vyavahara margaha, phenomenon. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. You have said, quote, I am not fatigued from labor, end quote. Although the soul is different from the body, there is fatigue because of bodily labor, and it appears to be the fatigue of the soul. When you are carrying the palanquin, there is certainly labor for the soul. This is my conjecture. You have also said that the external behavior exhibited between the master and the servant is not factual. But although in the phenomenal world it is not factual, the products of the phenomenal world can actually affect things. That is visible and experienced. As such, even though material activities are impermanent, they cannot be said to be untrue. Purport. This is a discussion on impersonal Mayavada philosophy and the practical philosophy of Vaishnavas. The Mayavada philosophy explains this phenomenal world to be false, but Vaishnava philosophers do not agree. They know that the phenomenal world is a temporary manifestation, but it is not false. A dream that we see at night is certainly false, but a horrible dream certainly affects the person seeing it. The soul's fatigue is not factual, but as long as one is immersed in the illusory bodily conception, one is affected by such false dreams. When dreaming, it is not possible to avoid the actual facts, and the conditioned soul is forced to suffer due to his dream. A water pot is made of earth and is temporary. Actually, there is no water pot. There is simply earth. However, as long as the water pot can contain water, we can use it in that way. It cannot be said to be absolutely false. I'm going to read the next verse and purport because it's the same continuing. In fact, it's continuing for the next few verses. King Rahugana continued, My dear sir, you have said that designations like bodily fatness and thinness are not characteristics of the soul. That is incorrect because designations like pain and pleasure are certainly felt by the soul. You may put a pot of milk and rice within fire, and the milk and rice are automatically heated one after another. Similarly, due to bodily pains and pleasures, the senses, mind and soul are affected. The soul cannot be completely detached from this conditioning. Purport. This argument put forward by Maharaj Rahugana is correct from the practical point of view, but it arises from an attachment to the bodily conception. It can be said that a person sitting in his car is certainly different from his car. But if there is damage to the car, the owner of the car, being overly attached to the car, feels pain. Actually, the damage done to the car has nothing to do with the car's proprietor. But because the proprietor has identified himself with the interest of the car, he feels pleasure and pain connected with it. This conditional state can be avoided if attachment is withdrawn from the car. Then the proprietor would not feel pleasure or pain if the car is damaged or whatever. Similarly, the soul has nothing to do with the body and the senses, but due to ignorance, he identifies himself with the body and he feels pleasure and pain due to bodily pleasure and pain. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Sva Padantikam Vancha Kalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I see many new faces. Welcome. In the first sentence of the purport, Prabhupada says this is a discussion between Mayavada philosophy, the impersonal Mayavada philosophy, and the practical philosophy of the Vaishnavas. So right away, the conclusion is that Mayavada philosophy is impractical. So why is Mayavada, first of all, what is Mayavada philosophy? The whole idea that there is only one truth, Brahman, and everything else does not exist. Jagan Mithya. Mithya means false. It does not exist. So their understanding, the Mayavada doctrine is that this table does not exist. The chair that you're sitting on does not exist. The clothes that we're wearing, they don't exist. The body doesn't exist. The earth we're standing on doesn't exist. It's all a projection of the mind. Because my mind projects whatever atoms to look like a chair, I think there is a chair. Otherwise, there is no chair. Jagat Mithya. Brahma Satyam. The only Satya, the only truth that is I am, I exist. It doesn't give any identification as to who we are, what is our purpose. It's Brahma Satyam. I exist. And there is no other qualification to that I exist. It is simply I exist. Now this is very attractive. And the other side, the Vaishnavas, our philosophy is that just as the Supreme Lord exists as an individual, cognizant individual, all his energies also exist. So his spiritual energy exists and his material energy also exists. So this table exists, the chair exists, the clothes exist, the floor exists, everything exists. Yet, because it is the material energy, it is illusory. It presents itself as something which it is not. So what is it not? It is not for my enjoyment, but it presents itself as if it is for my enjoyment. Or it presents itself in a way it is disconnected from its source. And as long as we don't see the source, it presents itself as if it's available for us to enjoy, to interact with. So that is the illusion. It feels as if there is no proprietor. But as soon as we understand that there is a proprietor, then it regains its real nature, original nature. Just as when we see someone's wallet or money, if we don't know who the owner is, then the tendency is to take the money for our enjoyment. But if we know it belongs to someone, then the tendency to take it does not exist for a truthful person. As soon as there is a sense of proprietorship that's clear, that energy, in this case money, has its contact or connection with the source. So the illusion that the material energy presents is, I have no master, I have no source, I have no one enjoying me. Please come. Come and enjoy me. That's the illusion that it presents. And to facilitate that illusion, we are given our dear friend, the false ego. Because without false ego, in the pure state of the soul is very clear, everything belongs to Krishna. This is called Akshara consciousness. In the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes Dva vimau purushau loke ksharascha evacha. In this world there are two categories of persons. One is called kshara, the fallible ones, those who fall into the material consciousness. And akshara evacha, and those whose consciousness does not degrade. So the akshara consciousness is everything is in relation to Krishna. It is for Krishna, that Krishna is the source of and the ultimate object of all enjoyment. When that, to remove that, to facilitate the rebellious decision that the soul has made, is given a false ego. And the false ego starts helping us make a distinction that this, whatever that item is from the material energy, is separate from Krishna. In fact, that consciousness makes things material. Anything. This material means I have seen a distinction or a separation from the source. Therefore, Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhumir apo nalo vayuhu khammano buddhire vacha bhinna prakritir me ashtada. When he uses the word bhinna, separated, it is separated from our perspective. That we don't see the connection of earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. We don't see the connection with Krishna. Therefore it is material. Very, very simple definition. What is Maya? Anything or any time, anywhere, when the connection to Krishna is forgotten or not seen, that is Maya. That which it is not. Actually it has a connection with Krishna. But we don't see it, so it appears separate. Take it for anyway, for us, in the more practical sense, objects of enjoyment, both gross and subtle. The gross objects, they are made of earth, water, fire, air, ether, but we don't see them as Krishna's energies. So we cannot connect them to Krishna. We use for our enjoyment. We take earth, water, fire, air, ether, right? Earth. People take land. And because they've begun with the premise that it is not connected to any source, we claim it as my land. I pay some money, I own this parcel of land. When actually that land belongs to Krishna. Earth in that way. We build a house, we put our name on top of it, Ananda Nivas, abode of happiness. And inside husband and wife are fighting all the time. It's not Ananda Nivas anymore. Or water. There are so many brands of water. Dasani, Aquafina, Evian, Smart Water, whatever water. And they all claim their proprietorship over the water and they sell you water. I mean, the whole concept of selling water is just unbelievable. They claim it's my water. No one can manufacture water. It is hydrogen and oxygen combined together. And we know the formula also. It's a very, very simple molecule. 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. Try as much to combine it. It will never happen. We cannot create water. Even if we try, we might create a little drop, as if that would quench our thirst. We need more water than that, especially in America. You turn the dishwasher, you've spent about 20 gallons of water. Take a shower, 20 gallons gone. Anyway, this is a sidebar. The whole Western lifestyle is designed after wastage. In India, you can take a whole bath with a bucket of water, that's 5 gallons max. And you can take a nice bath. But you stand under the shower, 20 gallons gone. Air. I heard that in Japan, because it is so polluted, Tokyo is so polluted, you can drop in a quarter and there's a machine that gives you you can breathe for 45 seconds, fresh oxygen, feel refreshed and move on. And they claim proprietorship. This air belongs to us. Anyway, it's Bhagavatam class. I would have said something else. I was trying to be funny here. The only air we don't claim proprietorship is that which we let out, isn't it? Who's that? I don't know. Not me. Otherwise, there is a sense of proprietorship. They want to make everything their own. So this is Maya. There is an owner, there is a proprietor. Prabhupada uses the example. If you see a pregnant woman walking and her husband's not with her, only a fool will say that there is no man in her life. How else did she get impregnated? So just because even in the material world there's so much happening, even if we don't see the bharta, the husband, still that's an indication that there is a person existing that is the master of that energy. The material energy, because of wrong sense of proprietorship or not seeing the real proprietor, presents varieties of pains and pleasures, gross and subtle. That is the illusory effect, that there is pleasure and pain. Actually, for the soul, there is no pain of any kind. There is no pain. He is always Ananda. The illusion or the illusory potency presents the sense of pain, the sense of suffering, misery, sadness, etc. and associated material happiness, profit, gain, happiness, all of that. But they're material. And the false ego facilitates this experience. The false ego means having a wrong sense of identity. So here Prabhupada gives the example of a car. A person buys a car and he identifies with the car. This is my car. And it is so important to me that I will spend my Saturday and Sunday waxing it for hours on end. And if I can't wax it personally, I'll spend about $100 to get someone else to wax it. And it's all shining and smelling good, and they feel so exhilarated, nicely waxed car. And if after spending $150 waxing it, if there's a dent in that car, they become so angry, so upset, that they don't mind yelling all sorts of expletives at the person who dented their car. Because they feel the pain. Although there isn't pain when the car hits someplace and there's a dent, physically we don't experience any pain. But mentally, we experience very severe suffering. We cannot eat, we cannot drink, our whole mind is absorbed in the car. Maybe not everyone can relate to a car. Let's take it closer. Clothes. Buy a very nice cloth and it's very attractive. Everyone says very nice, very nice. And we're running up and down doing some service and there is a little nail and it gets stuck in that and oh no! My new dress. And the whole day we are aware of it. My new dress. Oh man, that nail bug. And it creates the suffering in the mind. Nothing has happened to us. Now this is to the extent to which we can become detached. Now beyond that is the bodily identification. This is all bodily identification. Then there is the physical pain. Something, we get hurt or some cut, something. And we identify with that pain. It's painful. So I'm suffering. The wound is very deep. For different people, there's different degrees of tolerance of that, but still there's identification. For some people, especially young girls, if their nail breaks, that's worse than death. It's like, oh, my nail is broken. I cannot go out, I cannot meet anyone. Like that. Then there is even more subtler sense of pain. It's the subtle, the mental agitations, sadness, insult, hurt, anger. They're all little etches or dents in the mind. And we suffer from that because we identify ourselves with something that we are not. Now this is easier said than done. It's easier said than done because the false ego doesn't relinquish that sense of identity very easily. It convinces us every day, Prabhu, you are this body. Just look in the mirror, see how good looking you are. You are this body. And if not good looking, hey, you have fantastic intelligence. You're so brilliant. You saved $10 the other day. That is such brilliance. Or find out in ways in which you can invest your money and grow it. This is fantastic, Prabhu. Keep going. It's an identification. False ego doesn't let us. And thankfully, we have some persons in this world who will come and tell us, you're so nice. Finally. It facilitates the false ego further. Appreciation. And the tricky part is if we tell others, don't appreciate me at all because my false ego is really bothering me. And no one appreciates us. Then also it bothers us. Hey, no one's recognizing what you're doing. You're doing such good work and it is going away completely unrecognized. Can you do it in such a way that someone will see it? And then we do something that's flashy and ostentatious and someone will recognize. At least the newcomers will recognize. You're so advanced. Finally. This is the trick of the false ego. It helps us identify with the body. Oh, American devotees, Indian devotees, White devotees, black devotees. What is this? There's no such thing. So we have coined the terminology, black-bodied devotees, white-bodied devotees, unembodied devotees. No, there's nothing like that. That's our terminology. Yet, our thinking is still not changed. A side note is, if you've noticed, as soon as someone comes to the Hare Krishna movement, the first things that change are the lexicon, the language. Right in the beginning, a person will say, I was under the modes, Prabhu. Like they don't know what they're talking. But I was under the modes, Prabhu. That's a way of saying, I'm sorry, I messed up. Or there's a book about the Sunday feast. And in that, Kaunteya Prabhu writes that when we use language, we should use it in such a way that people can relate to us, or we can relate to people. So there's a little illustration of two devotees, a Sunday feast, a new guest. They don't know anything about Krishna consciousness. They're in the temple and they're with the guest, and one devotee says to another, Hari Bol Prabhu, let's decontaminate ourselves with glorifying Mahaprasadam. So the guest is like, what? What are you talking? So language changes, clothes change, hairstyle, whether there is any hair or not, but style changes. But the false ego identification doesn't change so easily. I am good, I am bad, I am very intelligent, I am a dullard, I am fat, I am thin, I am short, I am tall, I am whatever. These are all false ego identifications. Of course, there is progressive improvement. We know progressive improvement because some brahmacharis don't care how their clothes look. It doesn't matter, it comes straight from the dryer, it's all crumpled or never even washed. But I'm not this body, Prabhu. Or however, we go outside, completely disheveled, we're the Hare Krishnas, and the people look at us, why is he like that? We are not this body. And if that realization is true, then that devotee should not be in the Mahaprasadam line either, right? Because the soul doesn't need food. So we should be careful when we say and do things like that. Sometimes our laziness reflects as our spiritual realization. I am not this body, Prabhu, is a way of saying that I don't want to wash my clothes. Really? Or, however, it manifests different ways. Prabhupada or Vaishnavas give a very practical way. The practical way, in all seriousness, is that everything has its connection to Krishna. He is the proprietor. So when we take things for utilizing in Krishna's service, we revere them, we honor them, we are careful, we have full of respect, regard for those things, be it a dhoti, be it food, paraphernalia, whatever, friends, relationships. The impersonalists, they have an easy way out. Their philosophy is called the cop-out philosophy. The best way to say is, nothing exists. This is all illusion. Jagan mithya. It is very easy to say, nothing exists. Because if you accept that it exists, then you have to do something about it. So it's very easy to say, it doesn't exist. Some acharyas describe that this is the way, the parallel is how the cat drinks milk. When a cat drinks milk, if you notice, it closes its eyes. Why? That is the way. No one exists around me and I can drink milk. Or the ostrich, as soon as there is danger, what does the ostrich do? The first thing? What does the ostrich do? Sticks its head into the sand and says what? There's no danger. There's no danger. And gets a nice kick on the backside because the danger's right there. But to close your eyes and say nothing exists is an impractical way. Completely impractical. In fact, it cheats the person from understanding truth. But what, boy, is it attractive to say nothing exists. And the language is also very, very nicely presented. Everything is a mental projection. So when you're thirsty, what do? You're just projecting onto something as water, and the act of drinking doesn't exist, and when you drink, the thirst that is quenched is also illusion. So this whole idea that everything is undistinguishable, homogenized Brahman. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta defeated this philosophy very, very nicely. There was one Mayavada philosopher who was talking a lot in Bengal at that time. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur sent him a case of mangoes. Ripe, golden, delicious, luscious mangoes. And in that case of mangoes, he placed one green, sour, hard mango as well and sent it to the Mayavadi. And as soon as the Mayavadi opened the case, he accepted defeat. He said to Bhaktisiddhanta, I surrender. Because the trick was very simple. That if, according to the Mayavadis, nothing exists. There's only one, Brahman. You cannot distinguish. There's no two. There's only one, Brahman. So now in these wonderful ripe mangoes, there's a green mango. Which should he choose? The moment he chooses the golden mango, he has made a distinction. And if he chooses the green mango, he's foolish. So he has to distinguish. And he was defeated. Or this whole idea that nothing exists. And like Mayavadi, you should ask them, if nothing exists, why did you walk in through the door? Why not through the wall? In fact, the wall also doesn't exist anyway, so why not walk through the wall? If the Mayavadi has to go upstairs, where are you going? There are no stairs. It's all imagination. So it's very impractical. One cannot live one's life like that. But it sounds very nice, very attractive. In this case, Prabhupada describes that the Vaishnava philosophy is practical. He uses the example of a pot. So there is a water pot. It's made of earth. Actually, the pot doesn't exist. If you come to think of it, it is nothing but earth. Because it's shaped in the form of a pot and it has utility, you can use it as a pot. A water pot is made of earth and is temporary. Actually, there is no water pot, there is simply earth. However, as long as the water pot can contain water, we can use it in that way. It cannot be said to be absolutely false. It is false in the sense that it is earth. But it is true that it has utility as a water pot. But the real understanding is it's a transformation of matter into a temporary utility, for a temporary utility, and it goes away as earth. So we say the body is a transformation of matter. And it goes back. It mixes with the elements. In the Ishopanishad, near the end, there is this verse, Vayur anilam amritam, athedam bhasmantam shariram. Let the air in the body mix with the totality of air. Let the gross body become ash and mix with the earth. So all the elements return to their, unmanifest state. So we realize as long as the body exists, it has utility. It's a carrier. So our philosophy is very practical, unlike just saying it doesn't exist. Now, why do we have a sense of illusion in the first place? And Prabhupada writes, it's because of identification with matter. Identification with matter means when we think we are this matter, then all the concomitant pains and pleasures arise. So one solution is to think, I am not this body. Just it's a mental adjustment. I am not this body. Guess what? It doesn't work that way. The only way to come to the realization that I am not this body is to take this knowledge and apply it in service to Krishna when the false ego starts becoming diluted. That's the only solution. We can keep thinking, I am not this body, I am not this body. And the mental adjustment will not help. Because the mind by itself will not contain the realization unless it comes from the soul. And unless the soul is awakened to its natural consciousness, we call it the awakening of the dormant Krishna consciousness. Unless that happens, we can try anything. I am not this body. We can recite it 10 times a day, but it won't work. Although it has some value. So the point is, even knowledge, such as I am not this body, can only help us when it is applied. So we are applying I am not this body principle when we wake up in the morning. Despite the natural urge for the body to not wake up in the morning. Because going from ignorance to goodness there is inertia, takes a lot of effort. So when one tries to practice one's life, cultivate one's life according to the principles of this knowledge, then we slowly begin in the direction of moving to that realization that we are not this body. It doesn't happen unless there is a practical lifestyle of service to Krishna. That's the only way where the false ego starts diluting. In the association of Vaishnavas through a proper hearing and chanting program. It is through chanting, the very first verse of Sikshastaka, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, Bhava Bhava Davagni Nirvapanam. So that marjana, that cleansing, the removing of the identification only happens through chanting of the holy name. So the dormant Krishna consciousness is awakened. Without that, it's just not possible. We can say it, and it's nice discussion, but no practical realization of it. So Prabhupada says, the argument put forward by Maharaj Rahugana is correct from the practical point of view, but it arises from an attachment to the bodily conception. So Rupa Goswami has given us certain things, certain principles by which that bodily identification can become minimized. Elimination of atyahara, prayasa, prajalpa, etc. And increase of utsahan, nishchaya, dhairyat, etc. The 6 and the 6 here. These are ways by which the bodily identification can reduce. Even Krishna describes it in the 6th chapter. Yukta ahara viharasya. One who is regulated in his eating, sleeping and recreation. Yukta chetasa karmasu, in his activities. swapnavabodhasya, yukta swapnavabodhasya bhavati dukkha. He becomes free of material miseries. And the word regulated has two meanings. One is that it is done in proper proportion. But a higher meaning is it is done under guidance, regulated by a higher authority. So when we place ourselves under the guidance of, under the authority of experienced devotees, the spiritual master, that is the beginning of a program for becoming relieved of the false ego. Otherwise, the false ego convinces us that we are totally independent, we don't need anyone. We don't need anyone's guidance. We can make it. I'll end with, I've said the story in the past. One time Srila Prabhupada was sitting with his disciples and they were discussing something, and one of the disciples said that such and such person is becoming very popular because of his teachings. And so Prabhupada said, what is his philosophy? What does he teach? Srila Prabhupada, he says, you don't need any guru. You don't need to learn anything from anyone. Everything is already there. You don't need any guidance. And Prabhupada said, and that is what he's telling everyone? Yes, Srila Prabhupada. So he wants to be guru and his teaching is you don't need a guru? What nonsense. I said, the devotee said, Prabhupada has also written a book. Oh, what does his book say? His book says, you don't need to read any books. All knowledge is already there within. You don't need to read any book. And Prabhupada says, so he wrote a book. He wants everyone to buy his book to tell others, no need to buy a book. This is rascaldom. Everyone needs guidance. It's an essential principle. Tad vijnanartham sagurum eva abhigachet. Shrotriyam brahmanishtam. Very important. That is how. It's the beginning of the program for being relieved of false ego. Therefore we begin our day reciting, especially when we are going on the altar. Even if you're not going on the altar, we begin our day with offering our obeisances to higher authorities, to the spiritual master, to Lord Chaitanya, to Radha and Krishna, to the Vaishnavas. Why? Because that's the beginning of removing that false ego that I am independent. No, I am dependent on the Vaishnavas. I am dependent on higher order mercy. Gopi bhartur padakamalayur dasa dasa anudasa. This is the program for getting relieved of false. If that's not there, whatever we try will not work because the foundation is not there. We can read books, we can do this and we can do that and fast like this and not eat prasadam or go out and do many things. It doesn't matter if the foundation is not clear. The foundation is that I am a tiny speck and without Krishna's mercy, I am nothing. That is the beginning of a program for becoming relieved of false ego. And therefore whatever happens is Krishna's mercy. And interestingly, it's not just the beginning of the day, because in the beginning of the day we might be really good, but somewhere down the line, 15 minutes later, things can be very different. So our practice is to try to maintain that every moment. So we may not have in the beginning we may not have every moment's worth of consciousness, I'm a servant of Krishna. So minimally we start with 3 times a day. Dhyayam stuvamstu yashastri sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravindam. At least start with 3 times a day. To take it to every moment of the day. And that's our practice. And so when we are with devotees, we remind each other of that. That is why association is very important. Brahmananda Prabhu, at that time Swami, he and another Swami were ordered by Prabhupada to go to Bangladesh and preach there. And they at the time Bangladesh was called East Pakistan. And so somehow in their preaching they found themselves either in Pakistan or Bangladesh, one of these 2 places. And around 1971, the end of 1971, India went to war with Pakistan because they wanted to liberate Bangladesh. So there was war, and Prabhupada knew that the 2 disciples are in Pakistan. So he sent them an urgent message, get out as soon as you can. So these 2 devotees, they were on a bus trying to cross the border into India. And at the border, the security guards stopped the bus. And they saw them sitting in Vaishnava attire, tilak and all that. And they said, oh, these are Hindus. So they got them off the bus. And a bunch of guards raised their guns at these 2 devotees for a military style execution. And so one devotee, the Brahmananda Prabhu, turned to the other devotee and said, Prabhu, time to put your hand in your bead bag. We're going back to Godhead. It was the reminder for each other. Anyway, the story goes that something didn't happen. Someone stopped them and said, let them go. And they crossed the border and came back. But the reminder that put your hand in your bead bag, time to go back to Godhead. That is necessary because the whole premise under that is, well, I'm very insignificant. Without Krishna's mercy, I am nothing. That is the way to get rid of false ego and to see things in the right perspective as the energies of Krishna. Our whole philosophy is, we heard recently, Shakti Parinamavada. It's not Mayavada. Mayavada means everything doesn't exist, it's only imagination. That is Mayavada. Vyasadeva's philosophy is Shakti Parinamavada, transformations of energy. And energy transforms according to the will of the Supreme and our free will. Things look differently according to our consciousness. If my consciousness is separated from Krishna's interest, I see everything as open for my enjoyment. If my consciousness is aligned with Krishna's interest, then that energy presents itself as divine for Krishna's service. This is Vyasadeva's teaching. Okay. Any comments, questions? We have a few minutes. Edward, Bhakta Luke, and Bhakta Adam.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
My question surrounds what you were talking about with the false ego and identifying with material objects. And I guess I'll ask my question in the form of a scenario. Let's say I'm in possession of some object which is used for service, and another devotee asks to use that object for a different service when it's not in use by me. But let's say they don't have a history of carefully taking care of or promptly returning or things like that. So if you could just explain some of the principles that should factor in a response and how, I guess, what is the higher principle in responding?
Well, we could say, no. Depends on our maturity of consciousness. One response is, I'm sorry. In the past, every time I've lent you something, it has come back damaged, broken, lost, or it's not come back. What is lost cannot come back, but whatever it is, either lost, damaged, or broken, and that inhibits my service. I'm sorry. That's a valid response. Because that's something Krishna has provided you for serving Him. But someone might say, or someone might have a mixture in that, what says, this is my item. So the first place to check is here. How do I view this item or whatever it is that's in my possession for service? How do I view it, first of all? How do I view it? That will determine what response I can give. If I'm clear, if I'm honest that I'm actually attached to it in a material sort of way, then it is helpful to be relieved of it. But if the attachment to it is genuinely for the sake of service, genuinely, then the line can be clear. No, sorry. Now, generally it's not this or that, it's a mixture. So then the solution is, which of the mixtures has a higher proportion? And what is it that we want to achieve at that time? If you want to achieve a little freedom from that possessive nature, then it's okay to give and pray to Krishna, I'm so that I can be relieved of this. So it depends on circumstance, depends on what's happening inside at that moment. Yeah? Bhakta look.
Hare Krishna, Guru.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for the discussion. On the topic of impersonalism versus personalism, there is one argument that comes, which Prabhupada mentioned that personalism is practical.
Yeah.
That was kind of I maybe missed more elaboration on why personalism is superior, but a lot of the discussion was based on how it's practical.
Yeah.
Whereas impersonalism is impractical.
So that's why it's superior, because something is practical.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, there is a very devious kind of argument that comes from the impersonalist camp that theism, it's just practical. That doesn't mean it's necessarily true. Just because something's practical, people say that you adopt religion so that you have some peace of mind, some comfort, so you can go about your life. Like that, they just reduce it to a mere practicality. You see my point? So I see the point.
I don't see the validity of the point, but yeah, I'll explain.
Yeah, I would like to hear that argument defeated.
Within the premise for that argument is the truth has to be impractical. But why is that case? Why should truth be impractical? If someone says, it's theism, it's practical, and you've accepted it because it's practical, is it true that only when it is impractical that it actually starts becoming absolute truth? No. Truth by nature, the word truth includes practicality. Otherwise, how can it be realized? If there is no practical way, it cannot be realized. This is where the Mayavadis say, you don't need any books, you don't need any guru, it is all sitting there. It is all within you. You are the truth. And that's the biggest untruth, but you are the truth. And it is so impractical. But it's the fancy language, the way it is presented, that makes it all fantastic. But it's wrong to say that truth and the access to truth has to be impractical. So then let's find out, truthfully, how many of those persons have realized the truth. versus those who have a practical method. So then, now these persons who decry practicality, and then they should also make their lives impractical. They shouldn't follow anything practical. Otherwise it's cheating. Correct? If they're saying, you're espousing practicality, I'm espousing that I don't need to be practical, because hey, that's just convenient for you, then they should live a life of impracticality. For example, they should walk on their heads every day. Go ahead, you want to say something?
So then, I guess the argument might be that, well, we're talking about something that each party is claiming is transcendental. So then it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with our mundane practicality.
Sure.
Practicality in terms of our mundane experience. So then, and even if there were someone who were consistent in his philosophy, he says, it's all one, and so I'm not going to be practical. Like there was one philosopher, I think his name was Origen in Greek culture, and he would like go around naked and throwing feces and these kinds of things. So he was consistent in the philosophy. So then how could we defeat this?
Okay, so we give Origen the credit. What about his followers? Will they eat feces? Hey, go right ahead. That's totally fine. If that works, that is practical for them, right? It works, so you take it. For us, gulab jamun's really what we're looking after. They can eat feces, by all means. And we'll be happy to supply also if they want.
How can we bring such a person to then the devotional mind?
Well, here's the problem. In such philosophy, because individual opinion counts. Hey, that's my experience. That is a way of saying, but not said, that I don't need an absolute reference of scripture. It is up to me. That is that independent, rebellious mindedness, that it is my experience. It's my opinion. You cannot say that my opinion cannot exist, which is true. Everyone can have an opinion. But the opinion cannot be valid without an absolute basis. Last night was this whole conversation with some young man that we can all have our opinions, we can go about living lives with our individual opinions, and no two people can agree because, hey, that's my opinion. But we see and we need practicality because in day-to-day life there is a standard by which everyone follows. Now there are certain persons who don't. Still, there is an absolute reference to that also. For example, if Origen was eating his own feces or whatever he was doing, and there's another person who's really mentally ill, and he's also eating feces. Okay? Can we say that both are realized? Why not? There has to be some reference point to say, hey, he is self-realized and he is not. What's the absolute reference point? And so when Rishabdev also did like that, he passed stool and rolled in it and passed urine, the persons with ignorance thought he was a madman. And the great persons, they offered their obeisances like, wow, he's well realized. Same with Jada Bharat. There is an absolute reference for such realization. But when people don't want to take that, and so then your question was how to bring them into devotional realm. The first thing to not do is to not have any discussions, arguments. Because it actually nurtures that independent thought. They should be given some practical service to do. Something without telling them that it is service, but they do some service. It's the beginning of submission actually. And if they can't do any service, you give them prasadam. And if you give them prasadam like this, the moment they put their hand under the prasadam, they are submissive to prasadam. That's the beginning of submission. There are two ways to bring about submission. One is through instruction. That's the real way. And when one is not ready for that submission, the second way is prasadam. Everyone is submissive to prasadam. There is nobody who's not. Even if they don't like it, they may chew it and throw it away. Still, the fact that they've accepted it, their hand is below prasadam, it is submission. To whatever minuscule, infinitesimal degree it is there. It's the beginning. I narrate the story about the guy who came to make this gate for the Kishore Kishori. I gave him barfi, nice brown barfi that Jai Jagannath or the devotees made. It was so good. I gave it to him, he took it, he bit it. He said, "What is this?" He thought it was beef jerky or something. I don't know what he thought it was. "What is this?" I said, "It's called barfi. It's condensed milk, sugar. It's not meat." And he put it in the garbage. He says, "It's not meat?" Wow, man. You're welcome. There was one final and we'll stop. Hare Krishna.
Thank you again for a good class. I was appreciating the point, the definition you gave of material means seeing a separation from the source. And just the example of the water pot that Prabhupada was speaking on the purport.
More accurately, it is not seeing its connection to Krishna.
Yeah. So then my question in regards to that is, we have this attachment to things and this possessiveness towards things because we don't see it in attachment to Krishna. Like the wallet example, we don't see the wallet as somebody else's, so then we like automatically, oh, I can claim that.
Yeah.
I can claim that could be mine. From what I've been told too, there's a level of gyan that you have to first have, because immediately we're conditioned, so we're not going to be able to see everything possessions, the opposite sex, or whatever it is, the followers, wealth, or women. We're not going to be able to see these things as in relation to Krishna in a realized way. So there's gyan that has to be there. I guess my question is coming to the point of how much then can we, because you're also making the point of renouncing that kind of, the idea of vairagya. And it's hard to word this. To what extent should we have vairagya until it disturbs the mind? But even if through gyan we can see okay, this isn't mine. Are you getting anything that I'm trying to say? It's hard to...
Let me repeat to say, make sure I understood. Let's take the example of opposite sex or money or followers. And the question is, I'm understanding, to what degree should I say, no, better to stay away from it before I get the realization I can be used in Krishna's service. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. There is a proper program for becoming cured of the influence of false ego. And until the health recovers, it is better to be away from it. You understand? We're not rejecting or we're not becoming averse artificially. Not like all women are Maya. That is the wrong sense of renunciation. The right renunciation is, I cannot see them in the right consciousness. So better for me to stay away. You understand? So the responsibility stays here, not there with the ladies or they are Maya. They're not. It is Maya that we are seeing them like that. Or wealth, or followers. And now with wealth, the best way to be that is to be accountable with that money. When we are accountable, that is a way of being renounced about it. Not that we don't take any money, that we are accountable about every penny that is either spent or collected. Then we are renounced. We have to learn how to be accountable, how to use it, how to spend it.
So then I just thought of a practical example.
Sure.
Book distribution.
Yes.
We're interacting with women, we're interacting with wealth, and we're interacting with followers, people that are like, oh, you're very peaceful, like people that just really appreciate the monks. And so, in what way should we, if we don't have the consciousness to see everything always in relation to Krishna, but we have a service to do. So I guess, yeah, that's the practical question. To what extent should we not engage?
No, we should. So there was a similar question asked. I forget the full context of it. Yeah, I remember. There was a program at one of the parks here, a Polish program, summertime. And we were meant to do Harinam or distribute prasadam or something. And all the women were in bikinis. That's how they were there at the park. And my spiritual master, His Holiness Rompat Swami, was also with us. And on the way back, I was driving him. I asked a question that if it is like that, how does one be in an environment like that and not be disturbed? His response was, if the purpose is clear, there is protection from Lord Chaitanya. If the purpose becomes mixed, then to that degree the protection goes away, or we walk away from the protection. So the purpose must be clear. That we are out there extending our books, our smiles, our interactions with, let's say, women or whoever. The purpose is to awaken, to be an instrument to awaken someone else's Krishna consciousness. And that's it. And there is a soul in that body. And we need others to remind us. That's important.
So even if the consciousness is not there to see that in relation, but the intention is there.
It is intention is there, as described, that just being on guard, there is protection. When we walk away from that guarded, we put the guards down, we become vulnerable to seeing the body and not the soul. We don't see the soul, but the acting on the basis of knowledge. So we're called Jnana Chakshu, right? We see things on the basis of knowledge. When we walk out of the boundaries of that protection, instead of Jnana Chakshu, we see things on the basis of the mind and false ego. And that's the daily struggle. It's the daily struggle.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Premananda.